Hi everyone, it's Jay Egersdorff here, chatting about the Fantasy Premier League, previewing game week 38. So I've been away for a few weeks, been on holiday, and I've been really maxed with work commitments. So I'm sorry I've not been around to post up videos in the last few weeks. It's been absolutely flat out. So had to make sure I was putting some time aside to chat to you about the last one. I couldn't miss the opportunity to miss the final game of the season. So what I've done for the format this week, I'll give you a bit of an update as to where I'm at, where my team's at, and what's been happening with me. And I put out a tweet this morning just asking people for questions and stuff they wanted to hear about ahead of the final game week. So I'll run through some topical issues I thought this time round. Slightly different format, and then finally talk about the captain options at the end. So with regards to my team, I'm sat 286,000 at the minute. So 286,442. So if I can crack the top 250, I think I'd probably take that. I'd probably be happy with that. I mean, it's been a tough season for the whole year round for me, and there's a question about that a bit later that I'll come to, but I'll give you an idea of I think if you summed up my season in one example, it was when I went to check the Tottenham score on Saturday lunchtime last week. I had Son, and I went onto my phone at half time and saw it was 0-0 and rolled my eyes and thought, oh crikey. Clicked on the actual game to see what was going on and noticed Son had got sent off. I mean, Son, I don't think he's done a foul all season, let alone get sent off. And that, in a nutshell, has basically been my season in one example. Another classic move I did a few weeks ago, I bought in Firmino on that Friday night deadline when they were playing Huddersfield. Classic mistake. I was in a rush to get out the door. It was about 5 o'clock. I had to be somewhere. The deadline, of course, was 7, and I thought, I'll just get my team done before I go. The planned move was Lacazette to Firmino. Made the move, and literally seconds later went onto my Twitter feed, and all the news was there that he was likely injured and not playing. So I've had him in my team for 2 weeks. He's not actually got a point for me yet. So I think that's probably up there with one of my worst ever transfers. Going back a couple of weeks before then, I took a hit. I took a 4-point hit to get rid of Vardy and put in Lacazette. As we know, Vardy's absolutely fired since there, and Lacazette hadn't, and he subsequently became Firmino. So they're not the sorts of moves that you make when you want to be, or they are the sorts of moves you make, I should say, perhaps when you're finishing way off where you think you probably should be, or in my case where my averages over 13 seasons have put me. So really disappointing, but as I say, I'll chat more about that a bit later. So into the questions. So I've got questions about taking hits, I've got questions about what to do with Son, questions about picking out home teams over away teams in the final game week. So I'll come to all this stuff now. So Kuhn, Karam and FPL Batman have asked me kind of the same question. They want to know, is it worth taking a hit to replace either Robertson, looks like he might be injured unfortunately, or of course Son, who is banned. I think that probably ties in well to Spencer Lee. He sent me a question quite simply asking what are my thoughts on taking hits. So all I'd say on taking hits in the final game week, I think if I go back to the first bit, I think if I had to pick between 1 and 2 who to remove, Robertson or Son, I would probably take out, I think, Son, on the basis that, as I've said before, what I like about midfielders is they've got the maximum amount of points that they can get, that any position can get. So you get more points than a striker for a goal. They have the benefit of the clean sheet. Defenders, of course, lose points if they concede. So an easy move might be Robertson to Alexander-Arnold. Yes, that looks attractive, but at the same time, it only takes a Wolves consolation goal and that wipes out his clean sheet, whereas a midfielder could get beaten 5-1, but they score the 1, and of course that will give them 7 points, so it's still not a bad return. So if I had to pick, I'd probably pick one of the two. One of the two, that's not helpful. I'd probably pick replacing the midfielder over the defender. When it comes to hits, I'll give you a really good real life example of this. So you'll remember probably a few years ago, final morning of the season, it was probably about 2 years ago, and Josh King got put up on Instagram, I think it was, that he wasn't travelling to Bournemouth's game at Leicester, and that was the season King was absolutely on fire. He was a midfielder, and I'd already planned a move. I think I'd already made a move, and in the build-up to the deadline, I switched for a minus. I switched King to Sigurdsson, and this was the year I actually finished 101st. It's my best ever finish overall, and it's one of the biggest regrets I've ever made, because had I not taken a hit, my auto sub would have been Yoshida of Southampton, and he got 2 points, which I know isn't great, but my replacement Sigurdsson also only got 2, so my -4 plus the 2 he got, that's -2, and then Yoshida would have got 2, so it's still a 4-point swing. That swing would have taken me into the top 100. So yes, at the same time Sigurdsson could have scored, and that would have taken me deeper into the top 100, but my actual overall mission, which was to crack the top 100 overall, failed by 1 place. I think it was 101. It might have been 105 actually, so I may have got that wrong, which isn't very good. I'm pretty sure it was 101. We can check, can't we, on the on the ranking thing. But yeah, that basically meant that my challenge of getting in the top 100 was broken, and it was because I gambled. So we use that term gambled when we talk about minus points all the time. I think when it's just on a one-off game week, it can't be anything other than a gamble. Your players have got to do something within 90 minutes to go anywhere near getting the 4 points back. And it's got to be something more than an assist. If it's a clean sheet, it equals it. If it's a goal and it's a striker, it equals it. It's only a goal from a midfielder or a defender that's going to even put you into profit. So is it worth it? It could be, but equally it could disappoint you. So if you're going to do it, you've got to accept that it might ruin your overall plan, but it also might take you forward. So keyword there is, how much of a gambler are you, basically. So that's hits. Son replacements. FPL Liga has sent me a message. Who should he replace Son with? There's 5 contenders for me. I think the obvious one, and the one I'm probably going to do, is Pogba, and I'll explain why in a minute. You've got Fraser, who could do well, but that Palace game, really hard to predict. Neither team have anything to play for. It could be 3-3, it could be 0-0 that game. 2 teams that do have goal scorers in their teams. It's just, Fraser, I know he's a steady point scorer, but I just think on a one-off match, I think it's hard to confidently say that Bournemouth are going to score a couple of goals away at Palace, because they're probably this season's most unpredictable team. They've scored loads and loads of goals. They've let in loads and loads of goals. They've had times when they have looked good in defence and kept clean sheets. They've had times where they've got beaten quite considerably on the road and not scored. So I think it's really tough to predict with Bournemouth. You've got Lucas Moura, hat-trick hero. Will he continue that form against Everton? I still think that's a tough game against Everton. And then the other one is, of course, the Silvers, David Silva and Bernardo at City. I'll come to City in a bit, but they're going to have to score, right? So there's a good chance there that they could do well. But the reason I like Pogba, and the little caveat to this is, of course, I've not seen, as I record this, I've not seen Solskjaer's press conference, because that's tomorrow. I did see something that United have got some of the younger lads playing in the training with them. Whether or not that means they'll play on Sunday, I don't know, or maybe get some time off the bench. But I do think United and Solskjaer are under a little bit of pressure to win that game. Some bad performances, some poor results. They've obviously missed out on the top 4. They're in front of their home fans. People are saying Man United aren't playing well and Pogba's not playing well, but at the same time, that Huddersfield game, he hit the bar, or he hit the woodwork twice. So in FPL, in many ways, we're not really that interested, in a roundabout way, if somebody's playing brilliantly well, because they can play awful but still score. So that could get them 3 bonus on FPL, but if you got their review in the newspaper, the journalist might say, they were 3 out of 10. But it doesn't matter, because you don't get points for playing brilliantly well, you get points for getting goals and assists. Pogba takes the penalties. We saw on Sunday he still gets forward. You'd feel that United you'd expect them to beat Cardiff, you'd definitely expect them to score. So on that basis, I think Pogba is probably the safest option for a one-off game week. So that answers that one. So that's Spencer. We had Neil K. His question is it really important to have teams playing at home on the last day of the season, as they'll be looking to send off the fans, make the fans happy before the break? And those of you who follow or subscribe to Patreon, hey to you guys, I did an article or a piece this week kind of all about this. And in short, I wouldn't have said it's really important, but I do think it helps. If you saw the press conferences, the post-game interviews last week, lots of managers talking about how important it was to win and how they really wanted to end the season on a high and all this sort of good stuff. So I think because we've got a number of matches where there's a lot of dead rubbers, there's only really, obviously, Liverpool, City, and then maybe you could say the Arsenal and United games that have got any form of bearing really on important issues other than league placing. I think that, yes, you could argue that teams will want to go out on a high. Even if you look at Watford, they're at home, and you could say that, they might rest players, but at the same time, they're going to want to go into that FA Cup game having won and be on the front foot. So I do think, as a one-off, because it's the last week of the season, I do think that could help. So it's worth factoring in. And then this brings me around nicely to Mike, who's asked me for a bit of a summary of the season from my point of view to do with my team. So what are the mistakes I've made? Why do I think I've finished lower than in his words, my outstanding average? So thanks, Mike, for putting that so positively. I think for me, obviously doing being a frequent contributor and doing these videos and a lot of the stuff I did in pre-season, so you probably saw some of the things I did with did some writing for the Times, and I did some stuff for the BBC, really like amazing stuff that took me from being just some guy who plays FPL and happens to be quite good at it to somebody who suddenly people were interested in speaking to and was interested in my views. And I think what I decided to do particularly this season was invest a lot of time in it and just really say yes to the experience and embrace the fact that people are interested in hearing my views. I probably didn't factor in actually how difficult that does make the game, because I remember going back sort of 18 months when I first started getting contacted on social media and things, before maybe 2 years actually, before I was really, really active. And one of my mantras, one of the things I couldn't understand that people didn't get was I used to say to people, it's your team, why are you asking other people's opinion? It's your team, just you make the call on it. And that stuck by me for all the years I've played and been decent at FPL. I think FPL's quite I think you have to be quite sort of instinctive. Like, you watch the games the week before, you look at who's playing well, you sort of pick somebody out and go, I'm going to go for him. And then what I used to do is use that week as then almost like the research, if you like, to back up that view. So a good couple of examples of that this season. I remember it was Wolves 1, Burnley 0, right at the start of the season. Matt Doherty was absolutely brilliant, and I spotted it, and for whatever reason, my old FPL me would have just gone and got him. It would have been a no-brainer, but for some reason that just wasn't there, whether it's or not through my own fault. This is self-inflicted. I'm not looking for a sympathy vote. I'm putting myself in the public eye, and that idea of it's your team isn't really the same. I don't mean I'm doing the team for anybody else. I just mean you're massively, every decision you make is under the microscope. Another really good one is Rico, the Fulham goalie. People thought I was absolutely bonkers when I brought him in around probably about 2/3 of the way through the season, and he's really showing his form now. Has he got 2 or 3 clean sheets and a whole host of bonus and save points, and funnily he's probably got one of the best fixtures this week at home to Newcastle, but I no longer have him. And it was really hard, say, going on Twitter, and just you'd have like, I don't know, 20 or 30 messages, people going, why have you got Rico? Even after I'd sold Rico, people were like, why have you got Rico still? It's like, I haven't got Rico. And so it brings into question, you're questioning yourself, maybe not consciously, but subconsciously the whole time. So I think there's some of the challenges I found, and I don't know if anybody else finds that. People who submerge themselves quite a lot in FPL, and you're active on Twitter and social media and stuff, whether you do find that can cloud your own judgment. I actually think maybe FPL as a game has actually changed from when I was very, very successful. You didn't have what we have now. You didn't have the access to the info. You didn't have the data. You didn't have expected goals. You didn't have the readily available information we have now. So I actually think the people, and again, I don't want you to understand this wrongly from me, because I don't want to take away from the fact some people have done brilliantly well this season, and some people who've played as long as me have done really well. So I don't want to say, oh, it's been a weird season, oh, I've been unlucky. I haven't. I've just not played very well, or not played as well as I could have done. That's the bottom line. But I think that where the game's going is the skill in the game now is actually taking all that data, all that information, all that opinion, and putting it in processing it and actually making good of it. I think finally what I'd say on it is what I've learnt this season is it's a bit like being Jurgen Klopp the other night against Barcelona and having your strategy that you think is the one that can overcome this really tough challenge in overcoming a 3-0 deficit. And every fan in that stadium and every fan around the world and everybody who's interested, they all have an opinion. They'd pick player X and play a different formation. They'd all have different ideas, and it doesn't mean that their ideas are bad, but it does mean that if Klopp was exposed or read or frequently interacted with all those people and was given those opinions, there's no question it would probably cloud his thinking, his judgment. So there's definitely a dissertation for somebody there who does psychology, if somebody wanted to pick that apart. But I think that's the way I've made sense of it and the way I've understood it. So I hope you agree that's me trying to give you a balanced answer. I'm not looking for a cop-out in any way. I've simply not played the game well enough this season, in my view. So finally, last question from Danish Magpie. He would like a detailed analysis of captain options this week. So he's looking at Mane, Salah, Sterling and Aguero. I mean, pretty... I think we've got to agree they're probably the obvious four, aren't they, that we'd look at. Certainly Liverpool or City players. So I think break that down. Do you pick a Liverpool player? Do you pick a City player? Well, Liverpool, let's look at them. Obviously, this is another mega game that they've got to win. Yes, they are at home, but I also feel that it's a case of they just have to win that game. It's out of their hands, which doesn't make it easy. I also think that it's a bit of a case of, can the players and can Anfield and can everybody associated with Liverpool who's going to be at that match on Sunday, can they raise it again after the Barcelona game? That was such an amazing, euphoric, unique result and scenario that they, situation that they had there. Have they got the energy to do it all over again? It's a bit like conquering Everest and then getting back down, and then somebody's saying you've got to go and climb it all again. Have you got the same? It takes a hell of a lot of mental strength to be able to do that. And then on the flip side, we have Man City, who've got the simple message: win this game and you're the champions. No other outside interference, no other factors to consider other than 90 minutes of football, 11v11, go and win the game, and then you've won the league. It reminds me of Man United a few years ago. They had Villa at home. This is probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I have a feeling it was a Monday night game. I remember watching it for some reason in the evening, and Van Persie, I think he got a hat-trick, and I think he'd scored 2 after about 15 minutes, and he was the popular captain at the time. And that was a scenario where it was like, win this game and we'll win the league. And I remember him, I used to love Van Persie, and he played like a man possessed. He played like a schoolboy that had just been told, you win this match and you've won the World Cup kind of thing. So I do think that's a big incentive for City. If you think about how they're going to want to win that game, they're not going to want to be hanging on to a 1-0 risk Brighton nicking a penalty or a set piece or some crazy goal in the last minute. They're going to want to be out of sight, 2 or 3 goals to the good to win that comfortably and winning style. So I think they'll be going all out to do that. Not in a gung-ho way, but I think they'll do it in a tactical, controlled way. So that means that you battle then, let's say if we're going to edge on Man City over Liverpool, Sterling v Aguero, it really is toss a coin, isn't it? It looks like Aguero's probably going to get the golden boot from here, even if nobody else, even obviously if no one else scores, even if he doesn't score any more goals. But I think if you're winning, and I'm assuming Aguero is probably the most popular pick in the polls, probably go him. I think if you're chasing, you go Sterling. I think it's a fine line. The reason I like Sterling anyway is that he gets more points, doesn't he? They're probably going to keep a clean sheet, so he gets 1 point extra for that. And if he scores, he gets 1 point extra. So if City win and he scores, then if they win to 0 and he scores, then already you're 2 points up on what you would have been. So it's a tough one, but I think I'm going to go Sterling. But at the end of the day, all 4 of those options, they could all score, couldn't they, in a must-win game. Salah's had the rest midweek. There's loads of factors. But hopefully I've kind of broken that down in a logical way for you. So, thank you all for watching this season. Shout out again to my Patreon crew who've supported me all season with that project. That's been great fun, and I'd like to think it's been a great success as well. The idea behind that was to help people improve at the game, not just give them the answers, and hopefully we get to talk again. I would like to again take the opportunity to thank you all for tuning in. It has been hard work doing these videos every week, but I hope you found them useful, and hopefully we'll talk again soon. Cheers, have a great game week.